Okay.
Welcome everybody. It's 4 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and begin today's conversation. I'm really excited. Those of you who've been on for the past few minutes heard me just say that we did this a couple of weeks ago, and if you weren't able to be here for that webinar, we're happy to send you a link for that. But I had a similar conversation with Rachel Marcotte at Cohoa in Colombia, and people were just really excited, I think, to hear about their journey towards standards-based learning and grading. And I'm really excited to have a team from another international school in Latin America, from American School Foundation of Monterrey, here today to talk about where they are on their journey. They don't have a report card developed yet, but they've been doing all of the excellent work to lay the foundation for standards-based learning. And so on your screen, you see to the far right is Andrea Fossum. She's been involved in systemic change at both ASFM and in the International School of Islamabad, where she served the community for 7 years as a classroom teacher and later as secondary principal. She's passionate that students and adults maintain the same curiosity and zeal for learning as a kindergartner, exploring the world, which I think is fabulous, of course, and is therefore dedicated to improving curriculum design and assessment practices that foster students' intrinsic quest for knowledge rather than act as carrots and sticks. So interested to hear more about that philosophy. To Andrea's left is Russ Steponic. Russ, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Okay. Russ is in his second year at ASFM, having taught in Dodd schools and other international schools around the globe in mathematics and economics, including the International Baccalaureate programs. His dedication to students extends beyond the classroom through his extensive involvement in school improvement and institutional change at every school where he has taught. Russ is also a contributing author to the online app GeoGebra. Did I say that right?
With soft G, GeoGebra.
GeoGebra. So I need to learn about that. And this has cemented his dedication to furthering math education in a blended learning environment. And to Russ's left, we have Elena Cortés. Originally from Spain, Elena has been an educator at international schools in Monterrey, Mexico for almost 2 decades. During her tenure at ASFM, she has been a 10th grade team leader and a driving force in the move to healthy grading. I love that way of phrasing it, to healthy grading. As next year's math department head, she'll continue to engage teachers in the move to standards-based learning through her own modeling and mentoring. In addition to her dedication to advancing assessment practices, Elena is a member of the ASCD International Inclusive Leadership Program, which we are so excited to be offering, and grateful that ASF and ASFM are hosting cohorts of this year. So if you're an international educator and that piques your interest, I'd be glad to talk to you about that. So welcome you all. Thank you for joining. There are many of us who consult in the area of standards-based learning, standards-based grading, healthy grading, equitable teaching, learning, and assessment practices. But I think as people go along the journey, what's really valuable is to hear from other people who are actually doing it. I mean, I can speak to what I do in my college classrooms, but it's really useful to hear where people are on their journey. And so this afternoon, what we'll be doing is I'll be interviewing your esteemed panelists here to learn more about their journey towards standards-based learning and grading, and have a really honest conversation about what's going well, what hurdles have they crossed, how would they handle things differently, so that you all who are on your journey somewhere along the way to implementing healthier grading practices can kind of learn from all that we have experienced and the challenges and successes that we've had. So I guess where I'd like to start, and any of you can answer, or all of you can answer, but what got you started? Who sort of kicked this off at ASFM?
Yeah.
Surely, I mean, ASFM.
He points the finger. He points the finger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Russ and I both joined ASFM in August of 2016, and it was during the orientation that senior administration said this is our goal within 3 years, is to be reporting to standards. So part of my first, as the curriculum instruction and assessment, was to look at the state of our assessment practices as they were, and kind of backward design. if our goal is standards-based grading and reporting, where are we now and how do we get there? So one of the first things that we did was to kind of look at what are all the elements in standards-based grading and create what's called a wikidity chart. So each element had its own little piece of paper, and kind of like a constellation of stars. What are the brightest? What are the things that are the most important? And I thought, well, just healthy grading practices in general. And so over the course of about 10 meetings, the high school faculty in the first year really wrestled with your work, Wormali, Bueck, O'Connor, Gusky, and had a lot of, I think, really productive conversations. And it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always, unicorns and rainbows kind of thing. The nice thing about this faculty is they can be real with each other, but yet still be kind and really searching for answers. And I think I got a lot of joy out of watching the struggle, which sounds kind of masochistic or sadistic, but it really was. And it was through that struggle that we were able to produce this year our philosophy of what does assessment look like here at ASFM. And I guess as people who struggled, I'm gonna
So this last year, this previous year, we were in 4 different committees. 3 committees. So we had one committee sort of looking at the large idea of zeros and extra credit. Were they together in one group? Yeah. Zero and extra credit. Why have we done this in the past? How is that not a healthy grading practice, and what might we do to change that? And so they did research on those things and came and proposed that we eliminate 0 grades completely. So we moved to kind of an incompletion idea. We can talk about that later. And then a 50 minimum. Mm-hmm. And then we eliminated extra credit across the board. So no teacher is giving any kind of extra credit work to kind of pad the points on the grades. Another group looked at the idea of incompletes and redos, retakes. What were current practices going on? And they were all, as you can imagine, in a school, people had wide variety. All of my life, I have never allowed retakes. And so I was like, I'm gonna be the standard on the wall. This is not gonna cross, So
we all cared about. It's not that we didn't care about our students. Like the good, we all cared about our students and did what we thought.
Exactly. Yeah. So we looked at that. They did the research into retakes and redos and incompletes and came up with, again, a proposal that we've modified slightly this year. But the idea is that the large picture is that we want to give students multiple opportunities to show their best work over the course of a semester in standards. And we came up with some parameters around that. And then the third group said, well, if we're taking extra credit out and we're taking kind of completion work out and all those other things, well, then how are we going to measure those behaviors which we know are really important? So I led the group looking at dispositions and beginning to think about how do we report out dispositions and skills separately from the academic achievement on particular standards.
So Russ, since you have a background with the IB, did you all lean on approaches to learning at all in that work? How did you all resolve?
I started to, ISOI is an IB school now, and we did a similar process a few years ago in pulling out the soft skills. And as an IB school, we replaced them with the approaches to teaching and learning. We at one point talked about our values that we have hanging up all over the school. And Elena was part of the Integrity Council. Yes. So they were very, very integral in providing their feedback. But we have now settled on the CASEL competencies. It's an acronym, CASEL. So looking at self-management, relationships. So very similar to the IB's ATLs, but not exact, no.
And we're
in the process of developing the rubrics for measuring that and include them in our future report as a separate mark. From there.
What I really like, one of the things, having been working in this area for the past 12 or 13 years, One thing I really like that schools like yours are doing is you're moving away. We're not seeing so many compliance indicators. So I remember, even in the articles, some of the articles Tom and I wrote in the beginning, we talked about how it should be homework, cooperation, and it, now we look back and that just feels very compliance oriented and not so whole child, not so supportive of habits of mind or habits of learning or approaches to learning that are good for a lifetime. It's not that we want kids just to follow directions. We want all of us to have the skills to be good citizens. And
right. I think the one that's in there is like responsible decision making, right? So helping the students make good decisions about how much of this, especially with math, how much of this homework practice is necessary for me to do. And if a student chooses to do no homework and they're failing the test, well, there's some data that maybe you should start to do your homework, right? And if you're not doing any of your homework, but you're still showing proficiency and mastery on the test, then you're probably, what we do in class is probably enough for you. But then it's not a one size fits all. We have to have these conversations with our students. And my experience this year with our 9th graders is that most of our 9th graders are not mature enough yet to make that decision about homework on their own. We're still letting them make that decision, but we've got lots of students who are just, below proficiency, who don't yet appreciate that doing the practice will move them into proficiency. They can't connect those things yet for a variety of reasons, right?
Hopefully by reporting separately, it gives you a vehicle to have those conversations.
Right.
Yeah. Now, extending a little bit on what Russ was saying, I also teach 10th grade. We are partner teachers in 9th, and I teach 10th grade. And I do see the difference in that year. I've been doing a lot of self-reflection with my students. And after 2 or 3 times, they have made that connection of, okay, if I'm scoring low on today's PTT, then I need to go back over this, and maybe I have to stay with the teacher. So it's just a matter of giving them the opportunities and being patient, because eventually they will get there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned wanting to talk about hurdles. I think that as a school, we're seeing that is a hurdle, is helping students really make sense of the connection between the practice or the completion or whatever you want to call that homework stuff. Helping students see the connection between faithfully doing that and seeing their learning and evidence of learning on whatever that project or exam or presentation is. That's a place where we're finding difficulty as a school.
And I also think for the students, we have to be aware this is a change of paradigm, right? They are used to somebody telling them what to do exactly, and all of a sudden they have this freedom of, or this responsibility of taking care of themselves as learners, and it takes time for them, right?
Yeah, we used to reward that, right? With in Carrots and Sticks, we used to reward compliance.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is build intrinsic motivation to make responsible decisions, which is, wow, how much better of a goal is that? That we, because by the time students graduate, they're your students when they're 17 and 18, and then they're not. And in college, bless you, in college, they're going to have to manage this. And so you're really doing students a service by teaching them that skill that so many of us we weren't supported to learn that skill. We were all probably supported to be compliant, good students. So what are some of the other hurdles that you all have crossed as you've started to make this move?
Well, I think, and we're gonna have a closing bell here in a moment. So if we pause, I think we have a lot. We're a very ambitious school, and the faculty they really are some of the best I work with as far as their background, their willingness to want to shift their own paradigm in thinking. And because of that, we're able to do a lot of initiatives at one time. So I think one of the hurdles is we have our a values initiative. We have our RTI initiative, our inclusion initiative. We have the standards-based grading, blended learning.
Yes.
So I think part of one of the hurdles is making the connection between and among all of the different initiatives, so that people are able to see, standards-based grading doesn't stand alone. It helps us understand inclusion. It helps us bring together and serve all of our students. So I don't know if it's a hurdle, but it's a, yeah, if a hurdle and challenge, kind of the same. I don't know if you guys feel similar or.
Yeah, and it's funny because through my reflection process this year at ASFM, I've been realizing that all the areas, the teaching, the integrity council, the online learning, they all connect somehow, like Andrea says, and they piggyback on each other, right? They grow, they produce an exponential growth in the student when they are used together. And as a teacher, we have to use them with that in mind.
I think two hurdles that I would identify, one from a student side and one from a teacher side. I think a student side hurdle is as we've moved to sort of a minimum grade of 50%, and you know, it's not an overly generous incomplete policy, but a generous incomplete policy where they can, you know, get an incomplete for a week or so. A lot of our students are not understanding the importance of giving their best effort on their first work. And so a lot of students are just turning in something that's not their best work, let's use that, something that's not their best work, and they just sort of automatically want that, okay, I want to take an incomplete, or I want to do a redo retake. And they don't quite understand that in order to earn the right for that retake or to make up that incomplete, you have to show me some progress. You have to show me some work along the way. And a lot of students just sort of want to retake a test without having to do all that other hard work of, well, what standards did you miss? And what are some practice that we can help you do together to improve on that particular standard? And how are we going to hold you accountable for showing your improved learning so that when you do retake or rework a particular paper, it's not just the same thing you're going to turn in. So I think that's an education thing with our students we have to work on.
I think that's related to the question that it looks like Brenda just posted. If the brain connections are not well formed in adolescence, so I guess if, you know, we know that a lot's not fully developed yet, is it reasonable to expect students to make good reflective decisions? How would you all respond to that? It seems like a related question.
It is, absolutely, and that's part of what we've been working with in the development of the social emotional learning standards that are N through 12, so nursery through 12, and looking at books like Yardsticks and other works dealing with executive functions. You know, what does self-management look like in a kindergartner versus a 6th grader versus an 8th grader versus a 12th grader? And so scaffolding those expectations, not just for what the student should be demonstrated, and I hate the word should, but one might expect from someone of that age, versus how we as teachers also scaffold those expectations of, yeah, I need you to turn this in on time. I need you to create a work plan for the standards that you didn't make, and reassess in a way that isn't just, oh, hey, I got extra time from you because of these, you know, loosey-goosey policies. It's really, I am by 11th and 12th grade, I'm responsible for my learning, and I understand because I've had scaffolded instruction in these skills from the time I was in nursery.
I think my initial reaction to that is, like, I understand the students' brains are still forming, but our brains are also pretty plastic and pretty resilient. And so I think that as we're faced with challenges and we have to deal with them, our brain adapts to those. So one reason, for example, that adolescence has been extended now to age 24, right, is because students aren't really being held accountable for the real consequences of their actions. And so I think that if we have policies in a school and, you know, academic and non-academic consequences for academic and non-academic behaviors, which we don't want to encourage, if those consequences are real, then students begin to feel the real consequences of those, and they will begin to self-monitor and self-reflect and change their own behavior, and their brains will adapt to those things. That's what I hope. That's what I would think.
I think that also the relationship between teacher and student has an important part in all this. My relationship has changed with my students thanks to all those self-reflection opportunities that I have been giving them. I have worked on developing a more personal interaction with them, one-on-one rather than with the whole group. And I've had very good responses in some cases. I wouldn't say in everybody, right? But feeling like they are important to somebody and feeling like the teacher has a personal interest in their growth and in their learning has helped them to do that maturity jump a little bit faster.
Yeah.
And Brenda, I guess I would respond too that, you know, students' brains are not fully developed and they don't come into calculus class knowing the calculus procedures, and we teach those. And they come into their classes and don't necessarily have the self-regulation skills or executive functioning skills to either manage emotions or manage time, to manage all those pieces other than the procedures of the class. So we teach them. So we provide the support so they can learn that. We don't expect it just to evolve, just to happen. And also from a person who supports inclusion and differentiation, I would also suggest that, you know, even though there are sort of critical periods of time where certain skills develop, everybody's unique. And you may have a sixth grader who's really great at managing time and making responsible decisions and being a reflective learner. And you may have a senior who's not. And so, you know, I like to think of this as we would any other skill that we're teaching, where we provide the amount of support, the least amount of support that is required for the student to be successful. And so as Andrea was describing earlier, you know, we may be expecting that an 11th or 12th grader does this independently, but if they're not, we put into place the supports, really from the special ed literature, a system of least to most supports that allow the student to be successful. So some students may need pretty clear directions of this is what I think you should do. Others may need some guiding questions. You know, you really struggled with this. I wonder what it is that you might put into place next week that would make this go better, and have dialogue. So, you know, as we think more whole child, this is just another skill set that we have to teach, just like we have to teach the algebra procedures. We have to teach these skills. And many people, you know, have the opinion, and I probably fall on this side of the fence, that those skills are more important than the actual procedures or content, that these skills that transcend the curriculum and transcend time are really even more important than what we traditionally taught. So.
Well, that's as we move into the implementation of the SEL standards across all disciplines, then we will be able to focus on, you know, what does self-management look like in my English class, in my PE class? What does responsible decision-making look like in math? Because we often don't hear, and I'm sitting with two math teachers here, but, you know, character education, at least here at ASF, it's a separate class. And when I leave character education, I don't have to think about these things anymore, because now I'm going to math.
Exactly.
But by integrating all of those and having every teacher speaking the same language, working from the same ethos of this is what we believe, and this is how we are going to scaffold the instruction, not just in content and skills of math and English, but also in, you know, this is what it's like to get along with people. This is what it's like to work collaboratively. This is what it's like to be responsible for your learning. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. Yeah.
And we've had to do that as partner teachers. Like we have new skills that we're learning in our collaborations. So maybe this might be a good time to put up this this little sheet that I sent you about the standards thing.
So one thing, just to preface this. Russ and Elena have gone from being, you know, I'm not going to do this, to actually being leaders in the idea that, you know, they really understand we use Common Core here at ASFM. They really understand their standards. They really understand the power standards within the 9th grade. They understand how to create an assessment that is aligned to the standards. They understand how to disaggregate that data. So there's a lot of presuppositions going into what they're about to show you that we are still working on as a school, and they are leaders in this. So
Well, I'm really excited to hear about MP1, make sense of problems, and persevere. Because when I think of when I gained from my math classes, you know, I ended up going into a career where I don't use calculus. I don't use those procedures, but I'm really glad I took it. I might have gone into a career where I needed it, but even more importantly, I learned to persevere. I learned to persevere when something was really hard, and I learned to learn difficult procedures and implement them well. So I learned skills that I use outside of math, you know, and so that mastery motivation, as we call it in early childhood, when we don't give up when something is hard, is something that everybody learns in math class, because it's, you know, it's challenging, it's new content, it's new procedures. And so that skill of persevering when things get hard is why we're all successful, because we do that. So that, you know, so I'm interested to know more. So tell us about this.
That's our unit 1. No, you go ahead.
Yeah.
Our
So,
unit 1.
so this is the unit we just finished a little while ago. We'll start with the top part, because this was a particular unit where they were learning some geometry, but they ended up having to create algebra equations from that geometry and solve the algebra equations. And as we were thinking about this, and as we were experiencing it in class, you know, lots of students were getting the geometry right. They'd set up the right equation, but then they might solve the equation wrong. So they were understanding the geometry, but they were having trouble solving the algebra equations. And then we had other students who would look at a geometry problem. They would set up an incorrect equation, meaning they understood the geometry wrong, but then they would solve their incorrect equation correctly. So they were getting the algebra right. So here's, I think, is a really great example where we, as teachers, really had to make sense of what are the standards that we're looking at, and how do we disaggregate them. So you'll see that a lot of these particular questions have both a geometry standard and an algebra standard on blacked out, right? So where the black is, that's where we put in our grade from. We're using 5, 6, 7, 8 for a variety of reasons, but you know, that's not important. So, you know, if we look at, say, question 6, which was corresponding angles congruent. So the geometry block says, did they understand the idea of corresponding angles being congruent? Did they set up the correct equation and label their diagram correctly? And then if you go over to the 4th column, where the standard is solve equations and inequalities in one variable, then that's checking, did they solve that equation correctly? So it's possible that they got proficient in the geometry column, but they weren't able to solve the equation correctly for a variety of reasons. Or they set up the geometry equation, maybe they didn't use corresponding angles. They used alternate interior angles or some other vertical angles or whatever. But they have a wrong equation, so they're not proficient in the geometry standard, but that equation, they solved it all the way down, which is usually a harder equation because it ended up involving fractions or something that we didn't design, right? But they solved it all the way. So I think that's something that's been really cool for us, is to be able to look at a particular question that we want to test and separate out what standards are really going on here.
Yeah, I think what Russ and I are doing is looking for understanding, and sometimes the question has 2 different types of understanding, right? And this has been great because in the past, a student would be penalized points in the old system, but there is actually some growth there, right? And this allows us as teachers to recognize it.
Yeah, and to be diagnostic, right? Because you know, if you just had those 2 very different difficulties that the students were having may have both been expressed as a 75%.
Right, exactly.
75% of them right, but that wouldn't have helped you know what you needed to do. And those students needed to be in 2 different groups. You know, one group of students needs help on writing the right equation, and another group needs help with how to solve the equation correctly. So,
and then down at the bottom, you asked about the MP. Those are the Common Core standards for mathematical practice, and there are 8 of them. And as a department, we've said that MP6, Attend to Precision, will be tested in every unit. And then as teachers, we're choosing other ones that seem to make sense. So, on this particular thing, I think questions 10 and 11 were quite difficult questions that really involved a lot of connections and thinking that had to move the students through several steps. And so we felt like MP1, make sense of problems and persevere, was really how far did they get in those two difficult questions. Even if they got them wrong, did they persevere to the end and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, or did they just stop when they hit that first roadblock? So again, we were able to test the geometry and algebra of questions 10 and 11, and then separate out how far did they get. So that perseverance. So we're seeing lots of ways to test multiple standards with one question. And we're finding as well that our tests are getting shorter. So this test only had 11 questions, whereas before I might have had 20 or 25 questions in this unit. So it's making us more efficient, and the students don't feel over-tested and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, the great thing here too is, those of you who are maybe dipping, you can get a copy of it, whoever is asking. Yes. Well, I think our panelists will agree to share any of the documents.
Absolutely.
What's really great here is, and I know Ken, who is here or was here with us, but he would agree, and I think many of us who've worked in the area a long time and have been in a lot of schools would agree that when schools are making the move, one of the mistakes, like one of the things we wish we could go back and advise people to do, is don't try to implement a report card first. Think about your philosophy and your classroom assessment practices first, and let that evolve, and the report card comes later.
Yeah, in fact, we won't talk about report card design until next year. So we've extended from a 3-year time frame to a 4-year time frame after seeing that a lot of work, if we're going to report to standards, we need to understand our standards. And if we don't understand our standards, or if we're struggling to create assessments that align to the standards, how can we possibly report on them? So that's really kind of an extension of our timeline.
Right.
Really understand what we will be reporting.
And a lot of schools are still working to identify what their standards are.
Absolutely.
Right. And that has to come before developing a report card.
And we've had to work on our inter-rater reliability. Is that the right phrase? Okay. So we have to run ourselves. So when we look at this question, are we on the same page as to what perplexed looks like, or progressing, or proficient, or profound? And I think we had lots of conversations after our first 2 units. We're like, we're fighting over this, but just over time, we're really on the same page right now. It's amazing that I'll beat her like, what do you think this is? She's like, oh, it's this. I'm like, yes, that's what I was thinking too. And
we're reading each other's minds.
So I think that takes time as a staff for teachers at a particular grade level or in the same department to really make sense of what does proficient look like on this standard. And you have to have really deep, rich conversations and be willing to give up things, and be willing to be a little bit humble and a little bit teachable, and not sort of hold on tight to what we thought things should be or shouldn't be.
I get so excited when I hear faculty talk about inter-rater reliability. Increase their inter-rater reliability. And I think you did a great job of just describing what that means.
Yeah, thanks.
I think this is like a design cycle, right? You first design theoretically what your rubric is going to be based on the content you have taught, and then comes the second go around once you have the student work where you align with each other, your marking. See? And you can just not skip steps. It is important.
We gave a test today, and I sort of came up with what I thought the rubric was going to work with, and then I started to grade some student things. I'm like, oh, I didn't account for this. What are we going to do with this? So I kind of came up with an idea, and then we have a planning period together. Our school is really great. Any teachers that they're teaching the same class have a common planning period. So the school has put its money where its mouth is in terms of putting collaborative planning time together. So we meet period 4, and we sort of went through these student examples, and we sort of tweaked the rubric a little bit. And so now, we're good to go. And we haven't actually done this. I should grade your exam sometime. We actually haven't done that to see how it would work. But I think we're really happy with that kind of process. But that takes a lot of time
Yeah,
and a relationship where we trust each other and we're challenging each other and you know, all that kind of stuff. It's been really, really good.
And you know, Elena is doing a similar process with our 10th grade teacher, Kate. And she's actually kind of a leader in making some of our math courses more accessible. You know, like I use myself as an example. In many of the classes in high school, I was at National Honor Society, honors and everything, but math was not going to be one of those. And so it's not just a math class for lower performing students. It's more of an applicable math, or we're calling it business math or finance math. So, you know, Russ and Elena sit here as some tremendous models, but we also have Michael and Jenny in English, who are really fantastic with inter-rater reliability. So there is a substantial portion of the teachers who are really dedicating themselves. It's scary. This is a scary process.
Because you open up this curtain, right? You know, when you just give a grade to a student, like, here it is, you know, they sometimes don't know where it comes from. So now we're peeling back, well, where does that grade come from? And it's just all transparent to them, completely transparent.
So they're seeing the standards analysis at the end of each unit?
Yes, they get this sheet attached, stapled onto their exam at the end. And then the next class period, they do their own error analysis where they redo all the problems where they didn't get proficient. So anything that's not proficient, they redo that, they write about it, and then they staple that on together, and we hold all of those for the 9th graders. We hold all of them for our reading week before exams, and then we give them all back, so they get all their exams back with all of their standards analysis and all of their error analysis to help them study for the semester exam.
One participant's asking, how long did it take teachers to go from talking about what the grading scale means to designing the standards analysis sheets?
Well,
a full year.
A full year, yeah.
Really?
If you want, I think let me see, I'm hesitant to exit out of here because of some internet connectivity issues that we're having. But in my PowerPoint, there's maybe around slide 15, there's a timeline that talks about our first year and what we did throughout that year as far as having initial conversations about assessment. Two more slides. Slide 18. There we are.
Yeah.
So, you know, beginning in orientation, looking at really just what is assessment and leading with the idea that assessment is the most personal aspect of everything that we do. You know, it reflects who we are as teachers. Whenever our assessment is questioned, it cuts right to the very core of our identity. And really, if I could encapsulate what we've been doing, we're shifting our identities. We're becoming coaches and learning facilitators with students, rather than this is what you need to know, and this is, you know, I will penalize you if you don't, and if you don't get it the first time. So I think you said it in the most poignant way, that it changed your relationship with your students.
Now they shut down less often to math. In the past, that was something that I saw. When they didn't get a good result, they would just give up. They tend to persevere a bit more now, and definitely it's.
I think Kate would say the same thing. It's, you know, when a student would get more than 1 0, mathematically, pun intended, in math class, it's hard to recover from that.
Right.
But when you know 50, and it's important to know that here at ASFM, below a 70 is a fail. So even at 50. They're failing by 20 points. So we're not giving them any points, although at first the students seem to think, oh yeah, I'll just take the 50, you know, take the L. It's like, no, that's not what we do. But, you know, she would say, Kate has shared that for her students as well, it seems recoverable, and then they want to try, whereas before they just kind of
stop working.
Yeah.
Do you all have any plans to rethink the percentage system? Where are you on that journey?
Yes, we have a new me and a new principal coming in next year, And that's where we've already started, Lee Ann, after your visit in September, and talking about, what does a 4 mean in your school? The department had spent the rest of the afternoon really wrestling with, the 4-point scale, and are we looking at where 3 is proficient and 4 is for those 5 to 10% of the students, or are we looking at 4 is where we want people to be, and then for the 5 to 10% of those who might perform above that, how will we address reporting for those students? So the 1 to 4 will be tackled very early in the school year next year, and then also shared with the teacher. But I think for the most part, a large percentage of the teachers are already using some sort of scale rather than a 0 to 100.
Right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that they're already moving internally. It's just a matter of adopting it as a school.
So, and this year is transition because we still have to report out percentages.
Right.
And ultimately, as a school with the Mexican government, we also have
1 to 10
percentages, right? So,
Yeah.
But I think that what I think the idea is that we want that to be as fair and as transparent as possible. And at the 9th grade level, anyway, we have a little bit of flexibility because the 9th grade percentages aren't included in their GPA.
Mm-hmm.
So we're happy to be experimenting with no real long-term impact on the students' college education possibilities, because if we're off by 5 to 7 points in their percentage, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
then that's not going to impact them because only 10, 11, 12 go into the transcript, which goes to local colleges. So that's given us a little bit of leeway and
Mm-hmm.
pressure off of us and off the students. So they're okay with this 5 to 8 or 1 to 4 transition into percentages, because it doesn't really, it's not a life or death situation for them right now.
And we also have a 6th grade drama teacher, Paco, who's very dedicated to this, excited about the opportunity to really communicate to his parents, or to the students' parents, what does it mean did I get an 80 in drama? Well, really, what does that mean,
What does it mean?
What does it mean? What he's doing, and this is separate from the formal reporting, is looking at 6th grade, because in our elementary we do have a 1 to 4 reporting scale against standards. So the parents are used to having that format for reporting. But then he's also introducing them into it here in the middle school. So they have their traditional 0 to 100 grade that's reported on the report card, but he also has created in Excel a pretty fantastic and detailed reporting against standards that he shares with parents during conferences as well. So, we have a hybrid in a lot of ways that will serve as a really good basis to move into the reporting, official reporting.
What proportion of your faculty would you say are doing either the standards analysis or something like that? Or would you say that you're the beginning of that and those that are doing it are sort of modeling it and helping other people with it next year?
In math, you, me, Kate, is Chris Ann doing it?
Chris Ann, I don't know if they do standards analysis.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure they are standards based.
Yeah, so at the high school, 3 out of 8.
Sí.
So less than half. Let's just say less than half at math.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that we're probably more on the cutting edge than other departments.
English is
English
going to
doing
go,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
But there are other departments who are working toward that at a very fast pace.
Right.
So yeah, you have people on your shoulder.
No, that's fine.
So,
Yeah. Part of that too is that the English and math adopted Common
earlier.
Core a year
Right,
earlier.
that makes sense.
So right now, the social studies, they're just adopting their standards. The science is
Science.
just adopting their standards. So we feel like we want to just keep, we don't want to just wait and hang out. We're just
need to
continuing to move
Yeah.
forward and do the best we can.
Middle school science for sure. Yeah.
So,
Looking at Ken's question.
yeah, well, first Ken says he's impressed by the standards analysis and reassessment process, as am I. Before that question, one person asked what I was going to ask. I know that you all haven't, you don't have a standards-based report card yet, so you haven't introduced your parents to that. But how are parents responding to this standards analysis? Are they, did you do anything to talk to them about it ahead of time, and how's that going?
I think at the individual classroom level, those discussions are definitely happening. From a whole school perspective, a whole school meaning high school in this case, they were also received the philosophy and guidelines concerning reassessment and zeros. We have had discussions with them at events here at school, but there is not a concerted effort. I think the goal is to have the report card, the philosophy, a little more of a shift also to include the middle school at this point, which they will be adopting. They just talked this last Friday at their weekly meeting about any concerns that about the document that the high school produced and being adopted by them. And really there were a couple of things that, like, this is a little too strict for us. You know, we had 6th graders, we don't have 12th graders. So, but on the whole, they will be adopting those next year as well. So it's not as if we're, you know, avoiding kicking the dog on this. It's really just knowing the community and knowing the questions that will be asked that we're then prepared to answer.
Very good.
I haven't had any parents ask me about this particular document, and I don't know if that's because the students don't take it home or, but in general, I think our parents trust us, and as long as the student's passing, they're happy. You know, so you know that moving parents to thinking about, you know, a growth mindset and thinking about, you know, disaggregating this grade into different things, that's going to be a large work in process. Absolutely. Which,
Yeah, same as Russ here. What I have done in terms of communicating with the parents is when somebody needs to do a retake of any of the unit assessments, I send an email explaining the process and mention there that the student has the unit analysis done by standards, and only those standards that were not met are going to be reassessed again. So in a way, I'm educating them, but they either don't understand a lot of the vocabulary, or, like Russ says, trust us and don't come back with questions that often.
What we're excited about, I think, with our 9th graders, is at the end of the school year, we're going to have an exam, right, a semester exam. And Mexican law says that if a student fails, they have the chance to take an extraordinary exam. Right. So in the past, that extraordinary exam has just been like a redo of the entire semester exam. Well, what we're going to be able to do now with this kind of thing is take a look at, okay, what was the student not proficient in? And so we'll be able to just say to the student, hey, you did great on all of these things. Your extraordinary exam for the next 3 weeks, you're only going to have to focus on these 3 standards instead of these 12 standards, and your exam is only going to have this. So we're excited about that in terms of reducing the stress level of the students and reducing our workload as well, and coming up with a new sort of extraordinary redo assessment.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and even before the extraordinary step, we're experimenting with some 10th grade courses. What will it look like if their semester exam is we have enough evidence to say that of 10, I'm going to use 10 as just a general number, of the 10 standards that we must have in 10th grade math to move on to 11th grade, we still needed to demonstrate proficiency in 3. So that will be the exam for that student. And if they don't then pass that, or if they pass 2 of the 3, then their extraordinary exam becomes the 1 standard.
That's fantastic. I know that Andrea and Elena have heard this story, and I think Ken's probably heard it too, but Spencer, my son, failed the end of course exam for algebra, and it just didn't make sense because he knew algebra really well. And as we went, and the policy was, if you fail the end of course exam, you have to repeat the whole course.
Wow.
So he had to repeat the whole course, which honestly, like, that almost never makes sense because, I mean, generally, you haven't missed all the standards. Generally, there are things that you know and things you don't know. And it turns out it really piqued my interest, like looking at your particular standards on your on the standard analysis sheet that you all showed earlier, because The attending to precision was his only problem. And actually, because he knew the right operation to select, he carried it out perfectly. But toward the middle of the paper, he started making what we typically call careless errors. I wish we wouldn't call it that, because that implies the student doesn't care. And that wasn't the case. It was, it was related to dyslexia, and it happens. But toward the middle of the paper, he started making one kind of error, only one, and it was positive and negative signs.
Yeah.
So he would solve it correctly, but make errors of positive and negative signs. And so that was really the only thing he needed help with, was attending to precision.
What grade was that in?
8th grade. So it's Algebra 1.
And I'm curious, over the course of his next math career, did he work out negatives and positives on his own? Yeah.
Yes.
On his own. I'm confident he never got intervention for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great to know.
Yeah. And is now, he's in college and is, just breezing through all the calculus classes because he's so good at math. It's just, I think at the time, the attending to precision wasn't as interesting and as engaging to him as the problem. He enjoyed it. He enjoyed math. So anyway, but so it's just so clear that the journey that you all have gone on has led you to realize that being able to use your assessments diagnostically, because if the purpose of our assessments is to inform our instruction, it has to be used diagnostically.
Yeah.
It has to be. A 70 isn't good enough. You have to know what went well and what didn't go well.
Yeah.
Right. And it is a lot of work. Like we don't want to. Creating this document takes time.
The grading
takes
really
extra
need to
time.
look at the student answers.
Yeah. But for the students who want to use that information to remediate and retest, and it is a great thing. Now, a lot of our students don't, right? Again, at 9th grade, we've got a lot of immature students who are just happy with that, whatever that grade is, whether it's a 72 or 73 or 77, they're happy with that, and they don't come back and retest. So part of me feels like I'm working all this extra time for just the 2 or 3 students who want to remediate. And you know what? That's okay, right? I'll do that for them. I wish there were a way that I could just choose those students ahead of time and do the work only for those students. But we don't get to choose that as teachers.
Or that we could motivate the other students to want.
Right. Yeah, exactly. How do you do that as well? Right? So, yeah.
Right.
So it is. It's a lot of extra work. Yeah.
So what as you've gone on this journey and you've made so much progress, what looking back would you do differently? Is there anything you would do differently?
It all just, because we have so much going on at the same time, I think maybe to put together, I talk about the Wickedy and each of the elements for standards-based grading, maybe to do a similar thing for inclusion. So we have the constellation of elements or stars that are standards-based grading, and each star representing something that needs to happen. Same thing with inclusion, same thing with blended learning, same thing with values, and then really highlight, this star in this constellation is the same one as it is here, so that we wouldn't necessarily, I think, be overwhelmed or think that all of these things are just happening concurrently when they really are happening together. So I think from an administrative perspective, I think that would have been helpful. And I don't know, would that have helped to have that laid out, just real clear and visual.
So people see it's not 4 separate initiatives.
Correct. Yes.
You can subdivide them in this, but this that you're talking about is necessary for inclusion.
Yes.
Like a necessary component. You can't have high quality inclusive practices unless you have a mastery orientation.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. I think Andrea would agree with this. If I were to do it over again, I would not be such a vocal, cynical opponent of standards-based.
But I needed that. You and some others, by having that, and this is, if I could talk to the other administrators, it's important that they be on your team. And I don't mean that they agree with you. I mean they have the voice in the discussion, because through constant Constant. Well, let's just examine it from, and you can't take it personally as an administrator. When someone gets upset about this, again, it's realizing this is an identity shift. This is a culture shift. It's not, angry at Andrea, although it looks like it at the time. Bringing everyone into that discussion, particularly the most vocal, helped.
And when I finally got when I finally realized that my compliance system was not going to change the tide, like this is where we were going, right? I said, you know what? Then I'm going to get on board. If I'm going to have to do this, I at least want to be in the group of people that's making policy and that's making decisions. So it forced me to get in and really wrestle with these kind of things and kind of create some force of, okay, well, this is what would be important to me as a teacher, as a math teacher, as a ninth grade teacher, and let's be involved in creating the change in a positive way, rather than standing back and saying, oh, that all sucks, and I'm not going to do this, right? So I eventually got there, right? Yes. And I'm excited I did, but it took me 4 months, right? It took me 4 months to be like, okay, I'm going to jump on board with this and see what happens.
Yes. I would say that providing time for the faculty to discuss these ideas is key. There is never enough time to talk. I remember on year one when we were doing the healthy grading policies and some people were working on the reduce and retakes and others on the dispositions and so on. Each of the groups was becoming an expert in their topic. But then communicating that expertise to the other groups was something that maybe could have improved, right? Because by the end of the year, when we had reached supposedly a consensus, to some, so it was still a surprise, right? So keep on providing opportunities to talk in an informal way among the faculty to make sure the message is getting to everybody.
I think one thing that helped with that was that maybe in November, December, you were very open-handed. Well, let's just see. Well, what should we do about zeros? What should we do about incompletes? And then finally, like November, December, she finally said, hey, you know what?
This is what we're going to do.
Zeros off the table. Incompletes on the table. Yeah. Extra credit off the table.
Yeah.
Dispositions, reported separately, has to be separate. So once we knew that those were the parameters, I think it really created an impetus for us to say, okay, great. If we know that zeros are not going to be an option, then what are our options? How could we work with this? If we know that dispositions and skills are going to be reported separately, well, then what will that look like? So instead of trying to still figure that out, I think it might have been helpful for us to have that right at the very beginning. Because I think that's important for as administrators to say, hey, these are the non-negotiables. We're going to move here, but now let's see, how do we move here as a community? What's going to work for us?
And that's the balance as administrator between, anytime mandated change just comes down from above, there's pushback, but then there's also a point where, as much information as I'm giving, we're not getting to where I hoped we would. And they were very, very, very forthcoming. What do you want, Andrea? And I said, well, okay, no more, no zeros and no dispositions. And like you said, it was at that point, and it's like, fine, thank you, because we knew that's where we were going. Yeah. We just needed to hear you say it. So yeah. And if those of you out there are interested in kind of where to start, what are some of the non-negotiables? Doug Reeves and I have an article from Ed Leadership not too long ago called "What's Worth Fighting Against in Grading," and you can find that on. I have it posted on a website. LAJUNG.com. You can download it there. You can also find it on the Ed Leadership website, but that may give you some ideas of some of the non-negotiables to choose. Our focus group used that this year in crafting our philosophy statement, and I need to say thank you to Ken for spending an hour with us, one afternoon, really kind of struggling as we were getting ready to craft the final document. It was like, here's the things that we're finally still having issues with, and he was very generous with his time, and so I want to thank him for that. Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I hope you all, Andrea, I know you're going to a different school next year. I am. Yeah, Jordan. So excited. Yeah, but I hope.
Next year. We're here next year.
Girls will be there, and so I'm hoping you two might be willing to do this again. You know,
Oh, sure, yeah.
As you start getting deeper into this and making other decisions about how this is going to end up looking, and ultimately how it will look on a reporting device and everyone. Karen and the other person who asked on lajung.com, I put that in the chat window. If you browse there and click on publications, if you scroll down on publications, you'll see that article where you can download. Yeah, so we'll look forward to scheduling another conversation with you all some months down the road.
Absolutely, and yeah, there's great leadership coming in, so I know, and the teacher leadership, great things will continue here. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you all for being willing to be panelists today, and thank you for everyone who joined or ends up watching this offline later.
Great, thank you, Lee Ann.
Thank you, Lee Ann. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.